Hi, everybody. We are honored today to have Michael Pinchera give us a talk about the in progress Mars Pluto cycle and how it's going to play out over the next couple of years. So take it away, Michael.
Okay. Well, thank you, Susan. Well, I look at this Pluto Mars thing as like a 2-year initiation for the next 2 years. And I've entitled this Power, Conflict, and Responsibility. Because when I was first of all looking at the aspects between Mars and Pluto for 2026, and I chose to study the aspects between Mars and Pluto for this year. And I wanted to examine the whole cycle from conjunction to conjunction. So that takes us to 2028. So I focused on the waxing and waning conjunctions, squares, trines, and quincunxes. And while doing so, I started to look at how this cycle unfolds, like in synchrony with Saturn and Neptune's presence in Aries. So the dynamics and themes of Saturn and Neptune and their interrelationship it does inevitably shape and color how the Mars-Pluto cycle unfolds. So Neptune ingressed into Aries on January 27th, 2026, and collectively, Neptune dissolves boundaries and rewires our shared dreams. In Aries, this becomes intuition, meeting instinct, a drive to spiritualize action and reimagine identity itself. So this evolutionary invitation is to embody ideals through courageous acts, to let vision flow into deed. Yet, of course, the shadow looms, right? Illusions of heroism, escapist crusades, or addictive battles for righteousness. And the last time Neptune traversed Aries in the mid-1800s, when it was discovered, the world was, swept by revolutionary movements and the reshaping of collective ideals. And at that time, the creation of nations in Japan, Germany, and Italy, and the US Civil War, which is kind of a reshaping of the country, were like crucibles, for reforging identity. So once again, now, Neptune's dissolving force arrives at this threshold of beginnings, this Aryan beginning, this time of asking whether humanity will channel its dream into authentic renewal or lose itself in phantom wars. Neptune and Saturn and Aries, create an evolutionary synthesis. So from 2025 to 2028, their overlap generates, profound tension. Neptune dissolves, as we know, while Saturn crystallizes. And together they insist that dreams, Neptune, be tested against reality, Saturn. And out of this friction emerges the archetype of a visionary warrior, if you will, one who is not reckless, though, but spiritually attuned and disciplined. The collective challenge is twofold, okay? To resist delusion-driven crusades, which is Neptune's shadow, such as scapegoating immigrants or waging battles of false righteousness or false reasons, while avoiding, rigid suppression of instinct, Saturn's shadow. Their shared evolutionary task is to birth a new paradigm of leadership in which courage is infused with compassion and responsibility, is guided by our vision. Neptune in Aries asks, well, what vision are you willing to act on, even without certainty? Both individuals and collectives may feel a surge of imaginative energy, blending sensitivity with assertiveness. And so this human drama and perhaps cosmic humor gives evidence that this surge will hopefully inspire souls at every evolutionary stage. In identity and relationships, Neptune and Aries can render selfhood to be very fluid and shifting, shaped by context while simultaneously igniting deeper creativity. At its best, this transit calls forth bravery, crusading for causes beyond one's ego, and the emergence of heroic visionaries. Yet the shadow is equally potent with confusion, impulsivity, turbulence, aggressiveness, and maybe solitude. The evolutionary opportunity lies in discerning whether instinct is guided by illusion or infused with spirit, and whether the warrior acts from the ego's mirage or from the courage to embody a higher dream. So evolution calls us to embody ideals through courageous acts and to ground spiritual vision in lived reality. Yet the risks and challenges are formidable. Neptune's shadow in Aries may inspire illusory crusades, false messiahs, reckless movements that seduce with promises of righteousness and false hopes. The dissolution of identity will continue to unfold, as individuals struggle to anchor themselves while selfhood shifts with the context. And this is often entangled with, narcissist victim dynamics. The fiery energy of Aries can ignite bold beginnings, but without reflection, and it can easily turn into rash decisions. So then the task is to temper instinct with awareness, to distinguish between authentic vision and phantom battles. And only by integrating courage with this discernment can the collective channel Neptune's dissolving force toward, genuine renewal, rather than being swept into the turbulence of illusion, as evidenced by, the protests in Portland, Oregon, or Minneapolis. Saturn and Aries, from 2026 to 2028, is a karmic summons to mature the soul's instinct for action, courage, and identity. And it challenges impulsive self-assertion and demands the disciplined cultivation of authentic leadership. And this is a transforming of raw will into something that's sustainable, into soul-aligned purpose. And Saturn first entered Aries in May of last year, returning on February 14th, 2026, and is going to remain there until April of 2028. And this transit inaugurates Saturn's 29-year cycle and setting the tone for a generation. So during this period, Saturn's presence in Aries coincides with the unfolding cycle of Mars-Pluto aspects from conjunction to conjunction, 2026, this year, to 2028, pretty much January to January. The resonance is, unmistakable. Societies and individuals alike will be urged to harness Aries's primal instinct, not for reckless conquest, but for responsible, enduring action. And Saturn's, in the background, discipline tempers Aries' fire, forging courage into accountability and identity and purpose. So if we consider the raw drive, instinct, and assertion of Mars, alongside Pluto's deep cycles of death and rebirth, the collective evolution intensifies the willpower and confronts us with issues of control, survival, and empowerment. Mars and Pluto aspects often bring crises or breakthroughs that compel us to act from a place deeper than ego. Saturn in Aries during the same period demands disciplined courage and responsible leadership. The fiery the fiery force of Mars and Pluto together is filtered through Saturn's lessons. Impulsive energy must be matured into something strategic, karmically aligned action. This tension becomes clear. Do we act from instinct alone, or do we integrate power responsibly for long-term transformation? The evolutionary summons us to forge instinct into purpose, to temper raw will with accountability, and to channel the intensity of Mars-Pluto through Saturn's discipline. So in this crucible, if you will, the warrior is tested. The reckless force dissolves with true empowerment, emerging as courage, fused with vision and responsibility, sense of responsibility. So individuals will experience Mars-Pluto aspects during Neptune and Saturn Aries as initiations into a very deep soul-level courage, or calls for that. These transits compel confrontation with shadow impulses, demanding their transformation into empowered, disciplined action. On the collective stage, Mars represents the surge of will. This is colliding with Pluto's systemic force of transformation, marking periods of upheaval where societies are pressed to evolve beyond ego-driven conflict, or so we can hope. Saturn in Aries ensures that the outcome is not mere destruction, but the forging of a new lasting structures of leadership and identity. Aries embodies initiation, desire, and raw instinct. And Saturn requires these instincts or these impulses to be disciplined, structured, and purposeful. And within the lens of evolutionary astrology, this becomes the soul's lesson to channel courage into responsibility, to temper instinct with accountability, and to transmute reckless assertion into a transformation that's enduring. Yeah. So Aries is the sign of selfhood and beginnings. Saturn's presence here tests whether identity is rooted in egoism, or aligned with the soul's deeper will. The evolutionary task is to embody authentic leadership and to take responsibility for one's choices. Saturn in Aries calls for karmic courage, facing fears of inadequacy, failure, of rejection, and demands that we act with integrity even when instinct urges impulsivity. And this is the path of becoming, a long-term warrior rather than a short-lived crusader. Saturn sets limits and boundaries while Aries presses to break through. Their tension becomes a crucible for lessons in healthy assertion, respect for the autonomy of others, the building of sustainable initiatives. Okay? Balancing independence with responsibility promotes evolutionary growth, both for individuals and societies. Collectively, this transit will test new models of authority and personal responsibility, asking whether leadership can be forged not from domination, but from courage tempered by accountability, something that's called for very strongly these days. Saturn in Aries from 2026 to 2028 encourages collective restructuring, rooted in courage and aligned action. So as I mentioned, this marks the beginning of a new 29 and a half year Saturn cycle. And then when seeds are planted for how identity and leadership will evolve globally, rash actions without responsibility may lead to setbacks. And over-identification with personal will blocks growth. Now, this is a lesson visible, in our times. Yeah, the turbulence that's going on in our world right now. Aries resists Saturn's restraint, but the deeper teaching is to integrate the fire with form. And those born under this transit will carry the signature of disciplined empowerment, warriors of transformation who must balance instinct with responsibility. Adults who consciously experience this passage now, will find themselves confronted with, stark trials of instinct colliding with responsibility, both individually and across society. Saturn in Aries demands karmic courage, as I mentioned, to face fear, temper our impulses, and forge identity into sustainable soul-aligned leadership. So in evolutionary astrology, Mars-Pluto aspects symbolize the dynamic between the soul's deepest evolutionary desires, Pluto, and the way those desires are enacted in the world, Mars. Mars is often described as the lower octave of Pluto, but rather than describing them simply as frequencies, we can envision them as being on a spectrum, okay, as expressions of the human being. Pluto as a raw, instinctual, unconscious will and desire, and Mars as its conscious manifestation, harnessed, distorted, or refined, okay, during our lived experience. Pluto holds the deepest intentions for further development, while Mars expresses the what and how of those desires in action. To understand their phasal relationships, as most of us know, we measure from Pluto, the slower planet, whose karmic undertow anchors the cycle. And Mars, the faster and more immediate, activates impulses from mainly the inner luminaries, Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus, and what we have integrated from the outer planets and other objects. Yet, even these conscious actions remain rooted in Pluto's deeper, unconscious impulses of karma and destiny. From January 2026 to January 2028, the phasal relationships between Mars and Pluto unfold against very volatile skies, right? This 2-year period is about possibilities, probabilities, tensions, and lessons. Each aspect becomes an initiation, testing whether instinct is wielded recklessly or transformed into empowered, soul-aligned action. The cycle asks us to confront shadow impulses, to integrate our courage with responsibility, and to embody the archetype of the visionary warrior who acts not from a limited sense of ego, but from, we can call it destiny's deeper call. Mars entered tropical Aquarius on January 24th this year, and beginning with a waning conjunction in the 3rd week of January. It was exact on the 27th, and a waxing conjunction in early February. The ending of one cycle and the beginning of another both occur in Aquarius, where these instinctual expressions erupt as explosive beginnings, catalytic events, as we could see in our news every day, and we can check in our own lives. Individually, this signals moments of raw empowerment and confrontation with our own shadow drives. And collectively, it heralds upheavals, revolutions, technological breakthroughs, and the activation of social movements. With Saturn and Aries, however, these conjunctions demand responsible initiation, reminding us that upheaval without discipline collapses into chaos. And so Saturn's higher expression structures law and procedure, ensuring that fire is tempered by form. Pluto's Leo polarity point calls us to stand tall, take charge of our lives, and evolve toward creativity, generosity, and love. The degree to which one resists alignment with the soul's intentions will indicate how the expression devolves into selfishness, chaos, and destruction in both, personal and social arenas. The stark effects of non-alignment are readily seen in the present, right? Especially in the US, where collective identity struggles to reveal the urgency of its evolutionary task. With the waning conjunction, what is being finished will not return in the same form as it has run its course. Lessons have been learned, and their spiritual nature can be sensed, even consciously integrated. Because this is the dance of conscious and unconscious will, confusion, disillusionment, and alienation may arise. Yet these states serve as teachers, guiding us toward what is truly meaningful without reliance on external crutches, and reveals how meaning was missed or distorted in the last cycle. Pluto, as the deeper undertow, demands liberation from outdated self-definitions. The waning phase is not simply an ending, but a release, a stripping away of what no longer serves, so that the soul may stand bare, ready to encounter the next cycle with greater clarity. What dissolves now clears space for authentic empowerment, with identity aligned, not with illusion, but with what we feel to be our soul's enduring will. And as the conjunction turns towards the waxing, progressive initiatives begin to grow. Yet attachments to control and power will be fiercely defended as new endeavors move toward their intentions and clash with those who cling adamantly or reluctantly to outdated definitions of identity and authority that's stripped of spiritual context. I mean, the most obvious one now is just, the false identity around what's being protected in not putting out the Epstein files, for instance. The rising conjunction signals experiences of self-discovery, and this collides with what has become rigid and no longer viable. And these new functions may emerge instinctively and spontaneously, arising from what's already been developed, or they may be driven by unconscious forces pressing towards manifestation. Either way, the cycle generates experiences that promote self-discovery. This urges us, individuals and societies alike, to break through resistance and embody renewal. The waxing phase is not only about beginnings, but about the courage to confront and entrench power and to claim the soul's deeper will through action. So moving on to the square between Mars and Pluto is a crucible of conflict, tension, power struggles. Individually, it will test endurance, demanding that what we learn to assert ourselves, without domination. Collectively, it manifests as clashes between personal will and systemic transformation, where entrenched structures resist the force of instinctual drive. So Saturn and Aries, in the background, so to speak, provides the higher calling to treat these conflicts not as destructive battles, but as training grounds for mature courage. The square becomes an initiation, pressing us to temper raw instinct with responsibility, to integrate power into disciplined action, and to forge strength that we're both resilient and soul aligned. And in this way, the tension of Mars-Pluto squares becomes the forge in which authentic empowerment is, hammered, if you will, into lasting form. So this coming May 26th, Mars in the 6th degree of Taurus forms an exact waxing square with Pluto retrograde in the 6th degree of Aquarius. All Mars-Pluto aspects carry a deep need to transform limitations of identity and reality. And this square, as the crisis in action phase, demands that the evolutionary impulse seated at the conjunction be consciously established and concretized, Mars and Taurus. A new form must be built, yet the temptation to regress into old habits is very strong. This aspect unleashes raw power and energy, which must be consistently channeled toward relevant and meaningful goals. Pluto in Aquarius impels us to rethink and reject externally imposed limitations and outdated self-definitions that urge objectivity and detachment. And at the same time, it confronts us with the Aquarian shadow of aloofness, rigidity, lack of commitment. The challenge is to harness Taurus's steady will to ground new impulses, while Pluto in Aquarius insists on liberation from the obsolete. So it's not necessarily easy to discern, but it is there. The square becomes a crucible in which instinct collides with transformation, demanding that courage be disciplined, power be directed, and identity to be redefined. And what emerges is not simply conflict, but the opportunity to really make lasting empowerment through, conscious, soul-aligned action. To the degree we succeed in integrating this square, we are directed toward the Leo polarity point. Creative self-expression, heart-centered leadership, and the courage to stand in one's own light. In this way, conscious activity is focused on heartfelt humanitarian endeavors. Yet the square may also manifest through, physical confrontations or challenges to our values, pressing us to embody integrity in tangible ways. Excuse me for a moment. So looking at the Sabian symbols for these degrees, for 6 degrees Taurus, a bridge is being built across a gorge. Now this symbol, really speaks to overcoming difficulties and limitations through instinctively practical action. At the same time, 6 degrees Aquarius, which is a masked figure, performs ritualistic acts in a mystery play. And this evokes sensitivity to a higher purpose, innovation, and spiritual drama. And together they reveal the constructive potential of the square. Taurus Mars grounds the impulse in concrete form, while the Aquarian Pluto dissolves outdated definitions and opens the path to humanitarian vision. The evolutionary direction is clear. Through confronting values and building bridges across divides, we are called to take charge of our destiny. The Leo polarity point reminds us that true empowerment lies not in domination, but in creativity, generosity, and love. The activity of the square, really greatly depends on the individual's evolutionary level. The highly charged sexual power of Mars Pluto can be expressed across a wide spectrum, from being, purely physically driven to channeling energy into defending societally defined roles and identities, to aggressively asserting individuality, or ultimately towards the path of self-transformation and service. The challenge is always to direct this raw intensity into conscious empowerment. On the stage of the US Pluto return, these themes are magnified. Issues of taboo sexuality, abuse, and secrecy will rise further to national attention. And this is, definitely exemplified by the release and redactions, I say release with quotation marks, of the Epstein files. Such collective confrontations mirror the personal struggle. Shadow impulses, must be faced, not denied, if transformation is to occur. Mars ingresses into Gemini on June 28th, and on July 5th forms a waxing trine to Pluto retrograde at 5 degrees Gemini and 5 degrees Aquarius, respectively. The Sabian symbols illuminate this moment. Mars at 5 degrees Gemini, a radical magazine asking for action, displays a sensational front page. And this evokes the compelling power of propaganda and the urgency of reform, while Pluto at 5 degrees Aquarius, a council of ancestors, invokes the wisdom of history, the foundation of character, and the collective memory that guides transformation. So together, these symbols reveal the evolutionary purpose of the Mars-Pluto aspect, to align conscious will with the will of the higher self. The trine offers a channel of harmony, right, where instinct and transformation can cooperate. This task is to move beyond sensationalism and raw reaction, grounding the reform in ancestral wisdom on one side, and to allow the soul's deeper intentions to guide action. The waxing trine calls for actualizing what's been previously learned, making the evolutionary purpose individual and very specific. It invites awareness of the entire process, right, toward soul growth. Positively, this trine eases integration, allowing lessons to be established within both the individual and society. Yet those who resist their higher calling may still experience, a flow of unconscious will. In other words, having, genius intuitions and the desire to actualize them in daily life. In such cases, the proverbial devil has his day, but higher evolutionary truth remains. For some, this leads to a humiliating downfall. And as, for many observers, such reckonings cannot come soon enough. So Mars ingresses into Cancer on August 11th, forming a waxing inconjunct to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, exactly on August 17th at 4 degrees. The Sabian symbols illuminating the tension: Mars at 4 degrees Cancer, a cat arguing with a mouse, evokes instinctual conflict and the struggle for dominance. While Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, a Hindu healer, points to spiritual adjustment, healing, and reorientation of power. The inconjunct, as Jeffrey Wolf Green teaches, brings either clarification or confusion, right, depending on the openness towards adjustments needed to fulfill evolutionary intent. And this aspect provokes both inner and outer crises, compelling us to examine ourselves and discern what must be transformed in our own lives, right? It carries the weight of a special purpose waiting to be fulfilled. Yet the true challenge lies in how to bring that purpose into tangible reality. And there's an unknowing with that. And this unknowing, paired with the urgency to adjust, calls forth humility. This inconjunct becomes a trial of alignment, forcing us to reconcile instinct with healing, and to surrender rigid control in service of transformation. The archetype of Mars, instinct, action, and desire, are rooted in Pluto's archetypes of transformation and unconscious drives. And together, they often manifest as a misalignment between impulse and soul intent. Mars acts too quickly, or perhaps ego-driven Plutonic power struggles distort the deeper evolutionary purpose. Hidden motives then surface, right? Bringing crises of adjustment and the need for refinement. Inconjuncts are inherently awkward, right? Requiring reorientation. So here, Mars' instinctive drive may feel misaligned with Pluto's evolutionary undertow. And this aspect calls us to recognize our own compulsive or misdirected actions and to adjust how personal will, Mars, serves our soul evolution, Pluto. Old survival strategies must be surrendered as they no longer serve growth. Big lesson for most of us. The evolutionary task is to cultivate conscious choice and to refine instinct. This requires humility, surrender, and transformation by aligning action with the spirit's deeper intentions. In this way, the inconjunct becomes, a crucible of refinement, something we really forge ourselves, pressing us to transmute raw impulse into, what our soul-aligned purpose is, and to embody courage, not as domination, but as service to evolution itself. Pluto as the embodiment of the soul's unconscious evolutionary desires, and Mars as their executor in real life time, reveal how instinct and inherent and intent interact. When in opposition, these forces face off directly, right? Powerfully manifesting as externalized conflict, projection, or confrontation with shadow material. And individually, this means encounters with shadow projections mirrored in others. Collectively, it manifests as ideological battles and generational confrontations where instinct collides with systemic transformation. Saturn in Aries requires integration. The warrior must be patient, accountable, and disciplined. So through the lens of evolutionary astrology, the waxing opposition between Mars and Pluto represents a crisis of confrontation. Instinctive action, Mars, meeting the soul's deeper evolutionary intent of Pluto head on, demanding awareness of power dynamics. The waning opposition, by contrast, is a crisis of completion. Old patterns of desire and control must be released so the soul can integrate the lessons and prepare for, what's being renewed. The opposition becomes a mirror. It reflects both the raw drive of instinct and the deeper undertow of destiny. The task is to recognize the projection, confront shadow, and to integrate the courage with responsibility. And in this testing, the warrior archetype, this is where it is tested, not to conquer, but to transform, embodying power that is aligned with soul purpose rather than, just egoic struggle. The waning opposition occurs before the exact aspect and precedes the waxing opposition, of course, and it signals the closure of a cycle, a crisis of completion. And here the soul confronts what must be released. Compulsive, survival strategies, power plays, and destructive desires, if they're there. The evolutionary task is integration, distilling wisdom gained from past confrontations to, in preparation for renewal. So the exhaustion from old battles and recognition of the futility of repeating power struggles often accompany this phase. Yet the opportunity lies in surrender, aligning instinct with soul purpose through humility and release. And by contrast, the waxing opposition, it's more of a crisis of confrontation. Mars's instinctive drive collides with Pluto's deeper compulsion, externalizing inner misalignment and power struggles. Psychologically, unconscious drives are acted out with, enemies appearing as mirrors of the inner shadow. This opposition offers, the chance for conscious confrontation, channeling raw energy into purposeful transformation rather than destructive conflict. The evolutionary call is to recognize how personal will resists soul level transformation and to redirect instinct toward empowerment aligned with what would be our destiny. Together, the waxing and waning oppositions form a polarity of confrontation and completion. One demands awareness of shadow through conflict, the other requires surrender and release. And both are initiations, yeah? It presses the soul to refine courage into responsibility. And as I've said before, to embody, power not as domination, but as alignment with a higher purpose. On October 3rd, 2026, Mars at the 4th degree of Leo stands in exact opposition to retrograde Pluto at the 4th degree of Aquarius. The archetype of opposition here is innovation, rebellion, and collective consciousness. It's an urgent call to break free from traditional constraints. This alignment can catalyze intense interactions, dramatic events, personal revelations, as the individual desires, Mars and Leo, clash with collective needs, Pluto and Aquarius. This exact opposition marks a moment of reckoning. Suppressed rage, control issues, survival fears, these all surface, demanding confrontation. Retrograde Pluto intensifies the inward pull, forcing both, ourselves as individuals and in the collective to face hidden motives and and perhaps ancestral imprints. Any unresolved karmic material rises to the surface. This exposes unconscious power struggles and evolutionary pressure to purge what no longer serves. And Mars demands immediate action, but Pluto insists on transformation before progress. The polarity of Leo and Aquarius sharpens this lesson, okay? The courage to stand in one's own light must be balanced with, the responsibility to the collective. The opposition becomes a crucible, I keep using that word a lot, where instinct and soul intent collide, pressing us to integrate personal will into the larger evolutionary arc, right? The task is not domination, but transformation, channeling raw energy into creative leadership that serves, both the self and society. The tension of this opposition lies between the conscious drive of Mars and the unconscious compulsion of Pluto. It can manifest, as I mentioned, as externalized conflict, projection, or encounters with adversaries who embody the shadow as we resist. Authority figures or opponents may appear as mirrors of our inner shadow, pressing us to understand and balance this dynamic between Mars's assertive independence and Pluto's demand for deep transformation. So there are lessons in courage, marked by choosing conscious action over reactive aggression. Jeffrey Wolf Green, he succinctly noted that this aspect gives the individual soul, intent, social meaning. Okay, the houses transited by this opposition reveal the arenas of life where these dynamics manifest in a social context. Needs, ideas, ideals, desires, and beliefs are contrasted not only with others, but ultimately with higher will. On the collective stage, this opposition intensifies power struggles between nations, institutions, and ideologies. Pluto retrograde signals the collapse of old structures, while Saturn in Aries points to bold new initiatives, okay, a collective push to purge toxic leadership in outdated systems. This exact opposition becomes a crucible of reckoning, okay? Instinct colliding with destiny, shadow confronting light, and both individuals and societies are pressed to integrate courage with accountability. So the evolutionary task is clear, transform raw conflict into purposeful empowerment, aligning personal will with the soul's higher intent and the collective's need for renewal. So on December 5th, 2026, Mars in Virgo forms a waning quincunx to direct Pluto in Aquarius, both at the fourth degree. And at this stage, Pluto's evolutionary force of deep transformation, power, and shadow integration is directed outward, manifesting in collective and personal realities rather than remaining in internal review. The quincunx is an aspect of adjustment, tension, and reorientation. But it's neither harmonious nor openly confrontational, but it definitely demands recalibration, right? Recalibration, often through discomfort or the crisis of function. Okay, something has to be readjusted. The opposition that precedes this moment brought clarification or confusion in attempts to accomplish evolutionary intent, pressing inward and outward crises that demand adjustment. And that sense of special purpose now seeks to be actualized, giving social meaning to individual soul intent. The waning in quincunx clarifies awareness of personal and social limitations, what can and cannot be concretized into social purpose. So, violations of boundaries, whether individual or collective, often spark emotional confrontations that cultivate humility. Symbolically, the waning phase is the evolutionary stage of letting go, surrendering compulsive drives, outdated strategies, and rigid definitions of identity. The task is to release what no longer serves so that the soul's deeper purpose can emerge with clarity. So Mars is finalizing a cycle of Pluto, signaling integration of lessons learned and the release of compulsive patterns. The waning quincunx marks a karmic moment where instinctual drives of Mars must be recalibrated to align with deeper evolutionary imperatives of Pluto. And unlike the confrontational energy of the October opposition, this phase, it's much more subtle, right? An uneasy shift where old modes of assertion no longer fit the soul's trajectory. Instinct feels out of sync with deeper imperatives and producing, inner discomfort, which makes us feel like, we want to refine ourselves in whatever way is necessary. Saturn in Aries acts as the stern teacher, insisting on disciplined individuation, courage with responsibility, and karmic accountability, and self-directed action. And within the Mars-Pluto quincunx, Saturn demands that Mars's impulses be tempered by maturity. The lesson is clear, right? Power and will must be expressed not through domination or compulsion, but through conscious, responsible courage. And so this is a call to patience, to act responsibly while at the same time releasing compulsive patterns and to refine how independence is asserted. Collectively, this aspect points to adjustments in global power structures. Nations recalibrate military and economic strategies, shifting from overt conflict, as seen in the October opposition, to subtler restructuring of alliances, authority, and control. As it's the dynamics now between the U.S., Europe, well, U.S. and the rest of the world, but there's all kinds of restructuring going on, UN, EU, other countries too, Canada with China. There's so much restructuring happening as we speak. The waning quincunx becomes a crucible of humility and refinement, less about force, more about conscious adjustment, preparing both individuals and societies for renewal. This July, or next July, in 2027, July 26th, Mars in Libra forms a waning trine to retrograde Pluto in Aquarius, both at the seventh degree. And this waning trine marks the integration phase of the Mars-Pluto cycle. Mars embodies personal will, drive, and action. Pluto symbolizes the deep transformation, power, and evolutionary necessity. And the trine aspect suggests relative ease, though I think flow is a better word. Energy moves naturally, but not without karmic undertones. In evolutionary astrology, even harmonious aspects can carry necessity. Ease may lead the soul toward downfall if lessons are ignored, or toward wisdom if consciously integrated. These trines can be manifested outwardly. We can see them when people doing the most heinous activities, and yet everything seems to flow their way. That may be true for the moment, but the karmic piper will have to be paid. The waning phase emphasizes closure, assimilation, and release. And this is the time to consciously integrate experiences of past struggles with power, anger, and desire into wisdom, rather than repeat destructive patterns. And Mars trine Pluto allows both individuals and collectives to channel the transformative energy constructively. And instead of explosive conflict, there is potential for strategic empowerment, healing of past misuses of force, and refinement of courage into responsibility. Yet the trine is not passive. It asks whether instinct will resist transformation or cooperate with it. And those aligned with soul intent may experience flow as empowerment and healing. And those resisting may find ease becomes complacency, leading to a downfall of some sort. The evolutionary task is clear, is it not? To use this flow not as an escape, but as integration, refining will into wisdom, and channeling power into some constructive soul-aligned action. Saturn represents structure, limits, and karmic accountability. In Aries, ruled by Mars, Saturn is under the influence of instinct and initiative, demanding disciplined assertion and responsible pioneering. And this placement emphasizes personal responsibility in initiating new cycles, not reckless beginnings, but carefully structured ones. So collectively, Saturn and Aries often coincides with themes of new leadership, redefining courage and testing the integrity of bold initiatives. The waning trine between Mars and Pluto signals the end of a cycle, the integration of lessons learned, and the release of compulsive patterns. Saturn and Aries, meanwhile, marks the beginning of a new Saturn cycle, and together they form a paradox, closing old karmic struggles with power while responsibly initiating new paths of courage and leadership. The waning trine offers flow and ease, but Saturn insists that this flow be disciplined, accountable, and purposeful. And this alignment suggests a moment of synthesis. Mars and Pluto provide the evolutionary closure, channeling power into wisdom, releasing destructive impulses, integrating past struggles. Saturn in Aries provides the framework for renewal, demanding that courage be tempered by responsibility and that the individuation be grounded in accountability. The paradox is the lesson. Endings and beginnings overlap, teaching us that true leadership arises not from domination, but from conscious integration and disciplined renewal. Evolutionary astrology looks at the waning square, the 270-degree phase, is as representing a crisis in consciousness. And unlike the waxing square, which instinctively builds new structures, the waning square confronts what has already been created, questioning its meaning and releasing what no longer serves. And this confrontation creates that, new foundations of awareness that embrace the spiritual, distilling wisdom from past struggles. On September 9th, 2027, Mars's personal will collides in a waning square to Pluto's deeper evolutionary necessity. And this manifests as a tension between ego-driven action and the soul's demand for surrender, humility, transformation. Mars embodies instinctual will, assertion, and direct action. Okay, and as I've said before, Pluto symbolizes the soul's evolutionary intent for transformation and the compulsion to purge what is stagnant. The waning square, okay, is a place of testing, of being reforged. Mars seeks to push forward. Pluto insists on an inner reckoning. And this can feel like frustration, blocked will, or compulsive conflict until we learn to align personal drive with deeper soul purposes. The evolutionary task is to release compulsive patterns, refine our instincts, and embrace humility. And that, therefore, transforming raw assertion into conscious awareness. The square's tension is not punishment, but initiation. It presses both individuals and collectives to confront the futility of repeating destructive patterns and to redirect energy toward integration and spiritual renewal. In this way, the waning square becomes a turning point. The soul pauses, questions, and surrenders, preparing for the cycle's closure and the next beginning. Mars at 5 degrees Scorpio and Pluto at 5 degrees Aquarius form a waning square that presses the soul into this crisis in consciousness. Looking at the Sabian symbols again, for the one for Mars, the revelation of absolutely stable elements in all life and the strong confidence born of fundamental perception. Okay, this speaks to the grounding of instinct in enduring truths. Yet, without this anchoring, one risks spiritual inertia. Pluto's symbol, a council of ancestors, reminds us that the rich ancestral heritage of every individual forms a foundation of character, directing inspiration and transformation. So together, these symbols corroborate the dynamics of the square. The need to trust Pluto's inspirations, for transformation, and the treasures that ensue, while acting with Mars's confidence in spiritual law. This is the call to walk the good red road, to live in alignment with soul purpose, rooted in ancestral wisdom and enduring truths. And those who resist this alignment will find themselves constantly, flying by the seat of their pants, reacting inauthentically to external circumstances. In fact, to the degree one resists, that will be the ensuing degree of instability and reactive living. The waning square demands humility, surrender, and integration, transforming the instinctual drives into conscious awareness and grounding our actions into the wisdom of soul and ancestry. In evolutionary astrology, we say that the waning square represents a crisis in consciousness. Mars's instinctual drive collides with Pluto's demand for soul-level transformation. And this is intensified by Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Saturn represents the structure, limits, and karmic accountability. Neptune dissolves boundaries, infusing vision and spiritual longing. Both in Aries, under Mars's rulership, they insist that instinct be matured, disciplined, and surrendered to a higher purpose. Mars's raw will is checked by Pluto's evolutionary necessity, Saturn's deliberateness, and Neptune's call to transcend ego. The waning square says, you cannot simply act, you must understand the deeper meaning of your actions. And this is a karmic moment when the soul is asked to release old patterns of domination, aggression, or any compulsive willfulness. The challenge is to integrate Mars's assertive energy into Pluto's transformative intent, while Saturn demands restraint, and Neptune dissolves the rigid definitions of self and society. The evolutionary task is to act not from compulsion or ego, but from mature responsibility and alignment with deeper purpose. Saturn in Aries dissolves false identities, opening the path to spiritual renewal. And the waning square is the confrontation with shadow, realizing that brute force, Mars, cannot conquer the underworld, Pluto. Instead, the soul learns humility, patience, and surrender, forging courage into wisdom. Collectively, this crucible manifests as a recalibration of power structures, the testing of leadership, and the dissolution of outdated societal definitions. Individually, it is a redefining fire that tempers instinct into conscious choice and preparing the soul for closure and renewal. So on January 12th, 2028, Mars returns to conjunct Pluto at the 7th degree of Aquarius, the same degree where they previously formed a waning trine. And this closing of the loop is a karmic checkpoint. What once flowed with relative ease, trine, now concentrates into intensity, conjunction. And what was missed or left untransformed resurfaces, but this time with the force of initiation rather than resolution. The cycle completes and a new seed is planted. Mars embodies conscious will, drive, and assertion. Pluto symbolizes deep transformation, power, and evolutionary necessity. And their conjunction signifies collective surges of force, breakthroughs, or confrontations with hidden power. In Aquarius, these themes channel into collective systems, technology, social movements, radical restructuring. There's a lemniscate of experience flowing between the individual and the collective, each shaping and being shaped by the other. Saturn in Aries, 2026 to 2028, frames this conjunction with karmic accountability. And Saturn here is the elder warrior archetype, right? As I mentioned, okay? And it demands, disciplined assertion, responsible pioneering, um, um, being like the seasoned warrior rather than the reckless warrior. The Mars-Pluto conjunction, Aquarius, is not merely explosive. It is checked, tested, and structured by Saturn's demand for maturity. So this cycle has carried us through alienation, confusion, disassociation, discontent, and disillusionment, and teaching us to discern our personal and collective illusions, how we have made them meaningful, and what we truly need for security. We have explored the catalytic power of Mars and Pluto through every aspect, the aspects of square, trine, inconjunct, and opposition, each one pressing us to refine instinct, confront shadow, and surrender compulsive patterns. Now, at the conjunction, the soul is asked to act with conscious will aligned to evolutionary necessity. The challenge is to integrate past lessons into new beginnings, to initiate not from compulsion or ego, but from mature responsibility, in alignment with deeper purpose. And this is the moment of collective reckoning, okay? The confrontation with hidden forces within the technological, social, and ancestral orders and systems, and the opportunity to seed a new cycle of courage, responsibility, and transformation. So, yeah, I'll end here with, saying that may our conscious choices align with the good spirits. May we, all be devoted to goodness, beauty, and truth. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Wow. Wow. That was amazing. And I look forward to watching it again because I took notes on an envelope here because I was just so all of the aspects and all of the degrees. And my one note that kept coming back to me is that here in the U.S. Sibley South Node is 6 degrees and 40 something minutes. I wrote it down. 6 degrees, 36 minutes, which would be the 7 degrees of Aquarius.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Very true. Wow. I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Intense times.
Oh yeah. Just intense times. Yeah.
Yeah. All of the phases are just the way you elucidated, each different part of the phase is amazing, and the fact that they're going back and forth, and then in that period of time we'll also have a Mars retrograde, but it doesn't come back into Pluto,
right?
But we will have a Mars retrograde in there too, in Leo, of course, or Virgo and Leo. It'll be 10 something Leo, Virgo back into Leo, and then forward again. So
yeah.
That's amazing.
Pluto's just not done with us.
No, it's never done. It's never done.
It appears that Pluto may be just starting with us. We thought we were done with the Pluto, the USA Pluto return.
Well, and don't forget, Pluto was on its own south node too.
Right. Right. And the fact that the U.S. going through its Pluto return, okay, you can say that it's definitely for this particular country and system, but it's a symptom for the whole world.
Mhm.
all the problems that are going on here, it's just like this, it's its own sickness, I mean, the negative aspects,
Yes.
that needs to be healed, but you find the same crap everywhere, and so if the US can deal with this, I mean, I feel like it's going to take a generation just to mop up the mess, you know.
Mhm.
And, I mean, I could be surprised, I mean, because there are always, I've mentioned this before, I mean, it's like I always think of, Mr. Rogers. He talks about, in his own biography, he talks about when he was a kid, asking his mother, how can there, there's all these terrible things happening in the world, you know, why is there such evil in the world? And his mother just said, well, you just look at the helpers. There are lots of helpers in the world. See what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, so I mean, they're out there. I mean, I know they're out there, and they're, even people in the government, as terrible as it is,
Yeah.
that they're trying to do something. And it's just, it's slow going,
Well, and visible and invisible helpers.
True.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
always.
So, Jordan or Steph, do you have anything to add to this conversation before we wrap up?
I mean, I love hearing you talk.
Yeah.
You definitely have an ability to disseminate and, it just kind of comes streamlining out of you and I appreciate it because it feels organic. I think one thing whenever I'm thinking about, I mean, I've got a lot of Capricorn, so I think about these things a lot more than
Mhm.
other people probably do, especially just background and, my own family and stuff. And um, I've been really thinking about the feminine and masculine principle. And yes, they're talked about like a lot, especially right now, but I think that something with this cycle that it's reflecting is, how do I articulate this? That every one of us has both those in us. They're like naturally occurring and they are just principles. Like they're neutral, right? It's whenever it gets out of balance, out of whack, that it creates, uh, you know, for lack of better words, a fucked up situation, Um, sorry, grew up on a ranch. So I feel like this time period is really where, especially with America, because that over-identification with the masculine, it's now become distorted, right? Like how it's presenting, meaning that it's like a lot of outer energy, which is leading to this power dynamic, and power is now um, like the bottom line value that I see going on, especially here in the US. And so when that happens, it's like, well, then we've got to keep the power, right? We've got to, and then that means that there's going to be subjugation and, trying to overpower because there's this dynamic of understanding that, you know, if someone holds all the power, then it affects everyone else. You were kind of talking about this too. Yet I also think that this is where the distortion comes into play. That also just reflects the natural law of interdependence, that we all have a role and it affects each one of us. And
Mhm.
so I do feel like this cycle is going to be definitely confronting us where there's been this over-identification. And it started with the Pluto square the nodes, right? In Capricorn at 29, like that was a choice point. And here we're having this reckoning. And I think about Jeff Green's words. I read it on an old message board, or no, it was in a lecture. And he said, one day the greatest nation will become a nation among nations, right? And I think that that's this reckoning. And it
Yeah.
has to deal with the imbalances that have been played out. And it's interesting because I am seeing more of people honoring the feminine principle of interdependence, especially with Pluto and Aquarius right now, and like the community effort. And it's just taking us massive crisis, and it's a humiliating experience for people who want to stay in that power. And so, I was thinking about all of this as you were going through the different phasal relationships and how that's gonna unravel that yarn ball, so to speak, you know? So yeah.
One of the other things that I've noticed lately is a number of um, political commentators have said that this is the time where we can imagine how we want, kind of dream how we want our country to, what we want our country to become. And that to me just embodies the Saturn Neptune. And then this Mars Pluto just kind of, you know, well, the Saturn Pluto ruled by Mars, and then with the Pluto Mars Pluto cycle on top of it, it's just, I mean, the next couple of years are going to be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, with the Virgo South Node, while all of this was ignited, specifically the cycle, it's like, to me, Virgo represents reform on some level, like slow, gradual change. And yet that's part of the disillusioning Piscean experience, is we're realizing that slow, gradual change is not going to fix this. And so there needs to be revolution. And revolution, as we all know, corresponds with the dismantling of an entire structure in order for a new one to be built up. So it's like, I mean, you really can't make it up. You know, all of the transits that are happening right now within this cycle. And, you know, I think it's, I think part of the Mars Pluto also, especially it's starting in Aquarius, is very much like where through the crisis we're having to make a commitment around a choice to commit to community and to humanity. And it is we, the people, who creates the change, right?
Right.
Like and I think that's also part of this dynamic with the cycle too, is that, and it goes back to that masculine principle, or you want to call it the patriarchy or whatever, which just essentially means, you know, um, the father being the holder, right? Um, which is interesting because before this, it was people were calling, you know, the president daddy. And there's like such this, and what that reflects to me is we want to be saved, like Virgo, Pisces, you know, and yet now we're realizing that no one's going to save us if we're staying in this construct, right? And so that's also a part of the crisis, is like the commitment towards community, and like we're who's going to save us, not an external, you know, authority. It's like, nope, let it burn. We'll build it back up. We'll figure something else out, you know. Also, it's not
Yeah.
going to be like some collective enlightenment though. Like I wish, but that's a
No,
that's a
not
real
gonna
Yeah.
big
happen.
it's a
You
real
know,
big
Unfortunately, there are those who you know adamantly hold that Trump and the gang are here to tear things down and rebuild them the way they should be. You know,
oh,
they
they're the
just
social dinosaurs.
I know,
well,
but I mean,
you know, maybe the tear down part is true because,
yeah,
Well,
you know,
they
and
want to rebuild it in a way that is not inclusive for
exactly.
humanity.
right,
Right.
right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And right now, you know, tons just came out today. Mercury stationing retrograde,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, with its own planetary south node, and it being the ruler of the lunar south node. Um, but the punishment, right? Like of, I forget, I'm gonna botch this, but like taking away medical equipment, like even in Florida, that's a red state, right? Like, you know, and it's to evoke and spark fear that like if you don't suit up, show up and pick my side and become loyal, then I'm gonna punish you. And it doesn't matter if you're, you know, this or that. It's like, no, it's that God complex of choose me, only me, to the
Yeah,
exclusion of everything else, you know?
that's so
So,
true. And unfortunately, you can see echoes of, this is how, uh, in these, masochist or sadistic treatment, especially of the young women, you know, um,
oh yeah.
Epstein's Island and other places, it just that, and just the things that Trump has been caught saying, and so he's just he's into that punishment, holding the stick kind
Oh
of
yeah.
melody. No.
Well, and
Yes.
I keep coming back to this recent solar eclipse at 2850 Aquarius was right on the Sibley moon,
Mm.
and square Uranus. It's like, no, we are not standing for this anymore. We're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it makes me think of this is why I feel like I've been so connected to the asteroid Lucretia and talking about her. It's because she's really representing, because she's a historical figure. She was like, she's not, you know, I love Medusa and these other asteroids, but like she was an actual person in history, and her story coincides so much with what's going on, and the transits with her to Pluto and Cassandra are wild. And I do feel like, you know, just like Lucretia, she was able, through her exposing of the sexual deviance within the Roman monarchy, and then subsequently taking her life, you know, because she had the courage to do it and wanted to expose, but yet the values she had that had been interjected into her about her women's honor being corresponding to the family system, she felt she had to take her life. But yet that was so catalytic, I would say even more so than her exposing the corruption. And this is 504 BC, and we're not far off from it, right? It's same
Mm.
thing. And yet, like, that challenged people to start to wonder, why would someone feel like they had to do this, like this is wrong? And then that was the overthrow of the Roman monarchy, and that's whenever a new government structure was established, and that was the Roman democracy. And so I just see this playing out. It's like eye-popping and so literal, you know, right now, with
Why
all
don't you
of
tell
this. So
people, why don't you tell people where that is astrologically for
he's in
significance?
Scorpio right now,
Mm.
um, sitting at around 12 degrees. But the day that oh my gosh, what's her name? I cannot remember her name. The day that the it finally got signed, the release of the Epstein files, because what is her name? The
Virginia,
senator from
Fun.
Virginia
Arizona.
Giuffre.
Thank you. That day, and even more stuff was coming out. You know, Virginia Giuffre's stuff was reignited in the news. That was when Lucretia was still in Libra, but was directly opposing Cassandra. And then when Lucretia moved into Scorpio and was square to Pluto, her ruler, that's whenever Renee Good was killed. And then a week later, Alex Preddy. And so it's that dynamic of truth being exposed and believed, but being punished for it, you know, whether by falling on your own sword because you've internalized something, or because that structure is trying to punish you. And yet, what happens through all my research is that, you know, that is the catalyst, because people can't deny, they have to confront it. And it's like opening a genie out of a bottle. Like you can't put it back in, you know? And there's no amount of punishment that's going to get people to acquiesce or to bow down anymore, because it's outraging to them, because it's such a distortion. And that's the thing that you know, it's like it's ironic. What they're trying to do is to overpower, and yet that's actually empowering the community to come together and say, not anymore, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, and Jordan has done a couple of talks on that are posted on the EA Zoom channel. And then Michael is interested in, if anybody else is interested in having periodic, maybe panel discussions about as the cycle, the Mars-Pluto cycle progresses.
Evolves. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, as we get to the maybe approaching the square.
Yeah.
And
No, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested, get in touch with either Michael or Robin or me, and we'll see what we can work out.
Alrighty.
Michael,
Great.
this has been awesome. I'm
Well,
so
I'm
glad
glad
this
you like it.
finally happened. You were going to do it a while ago. In fact, I think this has been in the works since the conjunction, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I started all this back in December.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So we're finally, as Mercury turned retrograde.
Yeah. Perfect
That's
timing.
fine. It's fine. Yeah. Well, I don't know how long that was. It felt like it could be fairly long. But,
We're at about almost 90 minutes. Yeah, we're at about 90 minutes now. So
You
Okay.
did great on time, especially
Yeah,
for
you're about an hour.
yeah,
for the depth
Oh.
and what you streamlined out,
yeah,
going over the
Mhm.
whole cycle. Yeah, no,
yeah.
you made great time.
It was great. So thank you. And
Yeah. Well, thank all of you. Yeah, thank you for your time and your
absolutely.
input.
And we
Yeah.
look forward to the next turning of the cycle.
Okay, so how shall we organize that if we're going to do that?
Well,
I'll make another group in the messaging, and
Okay.
I'll add people to it.
Mhm.
And then I'll make a post on the page to see who's interested.
yeah,
Mhm.
in both groups, both
Mhm.
in the EA Zoom and the Friends of JWG
Yeah.
Facebook groups. And you know, if anybody sees this on YouTube and is interested, we'd be happy to have you join us.
Great. Yeah, I'm having this material and everything, setting out the videos. A friend of mine just offered to do this. She's from Slovenia or Slovakia, and I, though I know her in Ecuador, she's translating my stuff into Slovakian, Russian, and Japanese.
Wow.
Wow.
So this is great, and you know, she's sending them. I mean, she did her university work in Japan, and so she knows people there. She knows people in Slovakia, of course, and I don't know about people in Russia, but so it's getting around a little bit more.
That's awesome. So will she be translating this one?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool. Awesome. So
yeah.
we
If
look
I had
forward
it
to
in time, well, I'm sorry.
we look forward to multicultural, multinational participation in this going
Yeah, that would be
forward.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, well, let's see, it's evening for most of you folks, right?
Yeah, approaching.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you're just getting
okay.
your day started.
Yeah, it's now what, 9:33 in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so we've
You're
got
tomorrow. I'm calling you from the future. Yeah.
yeah, how's it going tomorrow?
Huh? Yeah, really. Yeah. Well, it looks like a nice sunny and very hot day.
Oh,
So,
awesome. I like it. Well, thank you. We'll
yeah.
see you next time.
Okay. Yeah. Goodbye all. Yeah. Take care.